AI Realized, the podcast about everything that is new, now, and next for enterprise executives deploying AI. Hosted by myself, Christina Ellwood, and my collaborator, David Yakovich.
Our guests will share what's driving AI adoption, use cases, and business models for the data and AI economy.
Why the future is bright. Why the future is bright.
Welcome to AI Realized, a podcast for enterprise executives leading AI deployments. From tackling security, data, and operational challenges to navigating organizational transformation, AI deployment offers a unique opportunity to redesign organizations from the inside out. I'm Christina Ellwood, your host for today's episode, and we're talking today with Domenic Ravita, the Vice President of Marketing at Plotly. Welcome, Dominic.
Thanks, Christina. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're very happy to have you here, and I think we haven't spoken to each other since AI Realized in October. Is that right?
Yeah, time flies, right? AI is moving fast.
It certainly is. You've been a ardent student of data and AI markets for more than a decade. Are you excited about AI for the world of data scientists?
Yeah, it's hard not to be. I think data scientists especially are attuned to what's happening because more and more what traditional work they had been doing in machine learning, classical machine learning, we might call it, often there was a separate group on another side of the company, maybe who was experimenting with generative AI. And increasingly inside of corporate environments with our customers at Plotly, we're finding that those experiments are starting to, those teams doing generative AI experiments are starting to join or work more closely with traditional data science teams doing classical machine learning and data science. And the reason is because they're really relying on the same kinds of data quality and data preparation. So they want to share that infrastructure. At the same time, they also are very skeptical of generative AI, which is good. Data scientists are in the job of reliable answers, or at least they can tell you how reliable an answer is. That's a large part of it. And so depending on the use case, they may be a little bit more slower adopters in some cases for their mainline work. And we see this even in talking with the Plotly community. But absolutely, everybody's experimenting with it, and it's a super exciting time in this area of data science and generative AI.
As you say, trust in the analytic results is vital in the data science world. So how are data scientists ensuring trusted results when they're using probabilistic LLMs?
It's not an easy thing to do. We find that their use cases are, you pick less risky use cases, or it can start with just your own development environment so that you're using generative AI to help you do things a little bit faster, a little bit more augmented. So we're starting to see generative AI help with more of the mundane tasks that can be a part of a data scientist's workflow, like just data shaping or things I would have taken a little bit more time to go look up elsewhere in documentation, or maybe something in my own GitHub repository. It can work as a faster search for your own discovery. And we see that kind of use case with generative AI outside of the data scientist role in lots of different roles, that it can be a good thought partner to help you. And so I think that's one of the first ways that we see it being adopted in a way it's not relying on generative AI for a final answer to give to a customer, for instance, or a final interpretation of a data analysis, but it can be used in the workflow of creating an analysis, in even upstream of that, in helping to shape the data. And for Plotly, part of that is Plotly visualization and Plotly interactive data applications.
So, paint a picture for me, Dominic, about how data and AI are brought together in code based analytics like Plotly offers.
Yeah, the world has changed greatly in the last few years. Years ago, I was a field engineer working with customers, creating real time event data, and then trying to merge that together to create actionable analytics with visualizations and things like that. And the environments we were working in were more like a monolithic UI driven visual analytics kind of technology, which was great. Years earlier, it looked like magic when you could do this kind of stuff with things like Tableau. But what's been happening, I think, the last decade is this movement of open data science, where it's a convergence of the macro multi decade trend of open source technologies. In data science, it came fully home to roost, and most of that development has been occurring in open source analytics code. It mostly is Python, although there have been other languages over the years like R and Julia, and then front end languages like JavaScript. But every survey you look at now, like the TIOBE survey or Stack Overflow survey, all of them are pointing towards Python as the leading language and growing even bigger beyond data science. So what it's enabled is a larger ability to do analytics as code. Some people call this BI as code, but it's larger than BI itself. It's data analytics as code. And so that marks a distinct kind of change from using a monolithic UI first kind of visual analytics tool, because this gives you a lot more flexibility. The way I like to describe Plotly Dash is if you took Tableau and turned it inside out and made it all accessible via Python. That is very much like the ethos of the kind of tool and the kind of flexibility it enables. And so that with AI, everything being done in AI, of course, is with Python, mostly Python. So these two ecosystems of AI and analytics as code have come together, and it's this super rich opportunity to create all sorts of interesting data applications, analytics applications that incorporate classical machine learning along with what's happening in generative AI. And there's a bigger movement here, I think, even beyond the analytics as code movement, which is this sort of everyone can code, which is an idea that Apple has put forth, and it's mainly kindergarten through college. But I think it's no matter what your career path is, there's going to be some element of coding. It's going to make you have superpowers essentially, because you're going to be able to work more easily with ChatGPT or any LLM generated code to augment what you're doing.
It sounds like a big step function for operational decision making by executives and mid level operators. Is that right?
I think it is, because it allows a lot more control over the code that you're using, how you build. You can build more specific kinds of analytical and data applications more economically. You can own that code, you can own your data, you can own the AI or the AI capability that you're realizing within that function. And just to give an example of that, we find most of our customers are using Plotly in an on-premise environment because they need it air gapped or it's a regulatory situation. So these are already sensitive data environments. And so they really like the ability to have this modular approach where it's open and extensible. And so I think that as every company is trying to develop the data assets within the enterprise and enrich their own data assets, and on top of that, they want to build their own AI capabilities that are unique and a core competency and a differentiator for their business, This approach of analytics as code and the approach that Plotly Dash has fits really well within that approach.
At AI Realized, we heard a lot about the applications that were being built inside regulated environments like banking and healthcare. Do you have some particular examples that you can use to illustrate how the combination of analytics as code and generative AI are being used together to generate value or ROI for companies?
Yeah, let me give you maybe two examples. Financial services is a really big vertical for us, and there's a company S&P Global who provides lots of different products across industries. Market intelligence data is one of them, and so they were looking for a way to provide their own data products as more easily to their customers, to also to describe what the data product is, but also to disseminate it and also demonstrate this. So they've built a data product, or which they call Capital IQ, and this is actually a Plotly Dash application. And so they've been able to, and this is the customer facing application. So you can explore the S&P market intelligence data sets. You can start to do some analysis there. You can get the feed API. So it becomes a portal for customer engagement for them as well. And they're incorporating generative AI in terms of summaries of data sets and things like that right into that Capital IQ product. So that speaks to the extensibility and flexibility of the kinds of data apps you can create with Plotly Dash Enterprise. A second case I think is really unique and quite powerful is what the pharma companies have done with Plotly, which is lots of different use case, but one in particular has created basically an AI-driven clinical trial planning process. So clinical trials for pharma companies require a lot of manpower. There's a lot of data. They're very expensive to run. And so there's a lot of coordination that has to happen from the protocol design for the study feasibility, site selection, and then, of course, the analysis of the data, tracking disease progression and documenting and extracting your metadata, all of this. So we have a customer in pharma who's built basically a custom data application for clinical data science that allows them to automate, orchestrate, and analyze the whole clinical trial process. So the business outcome for this is that they can cut the time in half of the trial itself, saving a pretty good financial sum in the process, and have all of the people and the data coordinated in a way so that they can make data driven operational decisions throughout the process, from activation and enrollment and the forecast for that. Are they hitting benchmarks along the way? Have they optimized their sites? What about the patient diversity? What about scenario planning on that data if things don't go as expected, which that's why you do the study, right? So you want to do these sort of what if study and analysis, what if scenarios, and study these simulations. So when I describe that, I think the listeners will see there's not really an app off the shelf that can do this at scale effectively and incorporate machine learning, the clinical trial data, the people. And you have to build an app like this for yourself. And in their case, a lot of these pharma companies, it's the data science team who's supporting the clinical trials, who knows the most about the data and the various kinds of data science and machine learning and Gen AI, which should be applied to that. And so when the data science team is making that decision, they need something that suits them to build that kind of interactive data application. And that's a situation where Plotly Dash Enterprise suits that very well.
Dominic, how does the generative AI and analytics as code come together in a use case for a Plotly customer? Bring some color to that for us.
Yeah, there are lots of examples from financial services to energy and pharma, but maybe if I just start with two. S&P Global is a large financial services technology company, and they provide lots of data and solutions to companies across the financial services industry, as well as to other vertical industries. They have a product called Capital IQ, which is part of their market intelligence offering. So they're providing unique market data assets to investors, hedge fund managers, marketers. And this is a set of data that they want to share with their prospects and customers in a unique way that allows them to see the value of the data set, explore it. They treat this as a data product, and that product is literally sold directly to customers. So they were looking for a way to disseminate that and share that product, but also for a way for prospects and customers to more easily see what's possible and see what's in the data and explore the data. So with Capital IQ, this is a customer facing application built on Plotly Enterprise that allows them to share that data, explore the data, do analysis on it. And they've also incorporated generative AI summaries and things like on that order to help for people to assist them in describing that data. And they're not doing this just for one data set, but there's multiple. So there's multiple sorts of ways to manage the application internally, which makes this easier for them. So that's one example of an external customer facing one. The second I'll give you as an example of an internal application that helps with operational efficiency. And that's for a use case we see pretty often in pharmaceutical development. We have customers in that area like Amgen, for instance. And so in that area, we see in like clinical trial operations is a great opportunity for this because it's very labor intensive in terms of staff of all levels, from PhD scientists, virologists, oncologists, et cetera, to the clinicians, to people working on the trials. And so within clinical operations, there's a large amount of work that has to be coordinated. The people, the processes, the data, of course, and the analysis on that data. And the data science teams that support this clinical trial operation are really the ones in the best position to understand how to make that whole enterprise more efficient and streamlined. But they need a data-driven, automated way to coordinate the people and the data and the analysis and the machine learning and the models that are applied, and also the incorporation of Gen AI where it's appropriate. And so they've used Plotly Enterprise to build a custom data app that allows AI-driven decision making and coordination throughout the clinical trial operation. So imagine every step of this process, from the activation and the enrollment forecast to incorporating external benchmarks, optimizing site selection and patient selection, and then doing scenario planning on all of this, and then simulating how the study is progressing throughout the whole process, and providing metrics and KPIs across therapeutic areas in the form of study metrics and KPIs. So this helps to get visibility from an operational standpoint so that better decisions can be made as early as possible in the process to ensure that this big, expensive operation of a clinical trial can go more easily. So that's allowed this company to basically insource the clinical research organization. They spoke about this recently at an open data science conference event. And I think this is one of the really interesting use cases that within pharma, but in lots of different industries, where the power of data and flexible applications that serve data science and AI, it opens up a huge amount of untapped potential for better in the moment operational decision making. So I'm really quite bullish on this market for data and AI applications in areas like this.
Dominic, that sounds like a great case too for agents.
Yeah, I do think it depends on what kind of agent we're talking about. I always want to understand what people mean by an agent. I think there are a lot of things being called agents today that remind me a lot of just heuristic based automation. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's a huge amount of productivity and operational efficiency to be gained by automation and even AI driven automation. As you think about each step in a process, there can be an AI informed. It could be through classical machine learning, or it could be a rule based on the result of some score that's been computed in the background. But the idea is right now, in terms of an autonomous agent that independently makes the decision for like the use case I just described for a very expensive clinical trial process, it's clearly not ready for those kinds of high impact decisions. That said, I think AI driven agents are a very interesting area that has a lot of potential. But but the way that they're being applied now needs to be appropriate with their level of the kind of result they can give. They are non-deterministic. So in many cases, the simpler, cheaper answer is just to use the right kind of imperative tool or statistically or classical machine learning generated probability result in terms of a score, rather than something that could be a hallucination from an AI agent, for instance.
So we're not quite ready for agents in that use case, even though they may sound like a good fit.
Yeah, I do think that there's a lot of experimentation happening there. But there's so much low hanging fruit too, and just it might sound boring. It's maybe not as sexy, but basically using the data that is available and the flexibility of Python with open data frameworks like Plotly Dash to do that AI driven automation. And I do think that is the foundation on which you will be able to in the future build a reliable agent based workflow on top of that. But at the moment, if you need like that deterministic result, that's probably you're going to use some sort of imperative or statistically based program for that.
And those two use cases that you just described are in production. Are you seeing a momentum in organizations going from pilots of generative AI empowered use cases to production?
We're in the business at Plotly of getting data science applications into production. That is one sort of market level problem that we see. There have been statistics or studies done by a few different organizations in the last few years that give results anywhere from 80 to 90% of data science projects don't make it to production for various reasons. And there are companies and people solving different problems as to why that is, to remove those blockers. The part that we solve at Plotly is the application itself, which more and more these days is becoming not just a web application with interactive visualization and really sophisticated controls for a read write application, but it's also incorporating Gen AI, and it's starting to look more like a compound AI system. And it's being built from this open ecosystem of building blocks. So it's like a composable application in that way. And that's only something that you can do if you have this sort of you can't do that with a monolith with a UI driven traditional visual analytics product. So that helps, I believe, provide more flexibility and more options for building just what you need. That helps to sort of the business case on get the motivation to get this into production because it meets the needs. You can see that. And you can really solve things that maybe that you couldn't solve before in specific ways, specific to your business.
Okay. All right. Where do you see AI going in the coming years for the enterprise?
AI is everywhere right now. We see it across individuals in helping to augment and accelerate tasks, from everything from content creation and marketing to code generation in the engineering team, and lots of processes in between. It feels a little bit like the Wild West right now in the way that companies are experimenting with Gen AI. Our expectation at Plotly is that it's going to become a little bit more operationalized and standardized within businesses, because it has to be for security reasons. But also, it needs to go that way so that so that companies can really get some bigger advantage out of it and create durable advantages, building on their data assets, creating new data assets as well, and creating their own AI capability. So we see a movement towards local development and local AI that helps to support that. LLMs are starting to become, at least the biggest of the general purpose LLMs, are starting to become a kind of commodity. And a lot of folks that are implementing it realize that they're becoming akin to databases, in that there's not a single database type that you use for all use cases. Rather, you describe your needs for a database workload and you find the appropriate database that has the right price performance fit for that. That's the same thing that's happening right now with LLMs. It's not one super LLM like a GPT-4 from OpenAI. It has its place, but there's many more types of language models that are specialized language models, or they're not built on language, they're built on chemical reactions and chemistry. We're seeing this across the sciences and different sorts of neural network based models like this being used to create other types of models that help predict. Essentially, they're token sequence predictors. And so there's a wide variety of applications of that general idea. And so it's very much what we see is that you'll, based on what your business intent is and where are your core competencies, that'll help you decide what sort of LLM to use, something off the shelf from an external provider, or to bring that model like a Llama 3.1 and run it in-house. It's becoming cost effective to do that in-house. Or if you need to do some level of, it's be expensive to retrain a model like that. But for small models, it can be cost effective to retrain them, but at least you can augment them in your enterprise with RAG or contextual docs put in the context window. Local AI, we think, is a big thing that's coming, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's shared by the GI Insights folks too, in their model of own your own intelligence, and some of the other startups that we've seen recently, like Knapsack, that are providing ways for you to run a small language model even on your own laptop. So I think the idea that companies that have precious data would want to be able to keep it inside and be able to fully leverage it without compromising it, I think is very logical, and the ability to make it robust and scalable for their operation. So I think that's a good, and I love your analogy to picking the database. I think that's a really good one, that you pick the model and the type of AI you're using based on your use case, and scale it accordingly.
I think that model also fits the cloud scenario, as to if you're doing it in the cloud or on-prem. Like the database, I think that's similar to, it's analogous to if you have the LLM accessible through an API in the cloud, or if you want to run this on-prem, you have a price performance comparison to do. You have a security concern to look at as to where the data is. And yeah, I think the analogy fits pretty well.
What resources do you recommend for listeners who want to learn more about that model, or you, or Plotly?
For Plotly, it's pretty simple, plotly.com. We've got lots of example applications in a gallery that you can find there on the website, as well as user stories across the many industries we're working in: financial services, pharmaceuticals, energy, manufacturing. And for me, it's pretty easy. You just go to my LinkedIn profile, look for Dominic. I think I was one of the early ones on LinkedIn. Yeah, and you'll find us at open data science events, Plotly events, Python events, excuse me, and basically on the data science scene.
What about resources for the process of selecting your model and designing your application? You have any thoughts there? Resources?
Yeah, we we're primarily focused on getting these data applications into production. And these applications, I said, are becoming more sophisticated in terms of the third party Python and machine learning and Gen AI components that they incorporate. So we basically solved that last mile gap to make this application actionable and literally take actions in the application. But we're fairly unopinionated about what you do upstream in terms of preparing your data, the data engineering tool chain that you're using, or in your model development. So you may use some sort of ML ops technology to help you prepare the model. We're not really engaged in helping do those upstream tasks, but once you have your model and you understand the users as a data science team that you need to serve, and you want to bring together the model, any API calls, the data sets, either embedded or that you're going to access remotely, all of that comes together in the production data application that we help you deploy, manage, secure, and also help to match your unique look and feel in terms of user experience for your audience. And that's something that data science teams, when they find that they're in a position to solve a problem through some sort of custom data application, they're faced with a choice. They're not full stack software developers typically. So that looks daunting, and they could outsource the project to another department in their company to go build the full stack. Or they could try to use some in-house tools themselves, maybe these visual analytics tools like a BI tool. But both of those situations or choices fall pretty short. And that's because they don't have the flexibility. They're not open Python based frameworks. And Plotly fills that middle space to help data science teams in particular conceive of, dream big, and get their AI driven and machine learning driven data applications into production inside of their corporate environments, or in, like with S&P Global, share them publicly with customers.
That's great. I love that example of you being involved in the last mile. I think that helps listeners to imagine where they would begin to look to leverage Plotly's capability. As we wrap up, what would you like our listeners to take away from our conversation today?
I would say this is a moment in time where there's more and more data accessible to you as a knowledge worker, but also a data scientist. And there's more and more compute and AI driven capabilities from this open data science ecosystem. So, what I would encourage listeners to do, and for executives, is to, within their businesses, to look for these opportunities to create operational efficiencies, create innovation, create new differentiating capabilities for their business through these unique custom data apps that they could create across their enterprise internally, but also for customers. And you're not going to find apps to do these off the shelf. You're not going to find internal tools that help you build that. So that's what I would encourage them to do, because there's so much potential for data and AI for operationalizing better decision making in the field, in the business operations realm, in the lab, in the clinical trial, in the field, for instance, like our customer UK Power Networks. Look for those opportunities for better operational decision making with data and AI, and look at data applications with Python as a way to do that fast.
Okay, thank you so much, Domenic Ravita, VP of Marketing at Plotly. I really appreciate you joining me today on AI Realized.
Thanks so much for having me, Christina. It's been a pleasure.